Hey, welcome back on my channel. Let me show you the biggest project I have ever built in my life using this incredible olive wood and black epoxy resin to create a stunning dining table. But let's begin with some wood preparation. After hours of sanding and grinding and polishing and removing all the dirt and dust and sand and rocks and everything I found in this cookies, and eventually all the slabs got flattened, I was ready to start making my own DIY mold using some 18mm MDF. So this incredible dining table will be just over 3 meters in length, which is about 10 feet, and as wide as 1.2 meter, which is just over 4 feet. So I never ever committed to make anything this big, and obviously to make any sort of dining table in my past. I have attempted smaller coffee tables, so this will be definitely my first, but hey, you need to start somewhere, isn't it? And this was an incredible puzzle game, putting down all the amazing pieces of wood and come up with a nice design where I can showcase most of the wood. And obviously I will be using epoxy resin, but I wanted the wood to dominate in this project. Then I started to mark the wood where I need to make the cut in order to fit into my mold. Olive wood isn't particularly a cheap wood to work with, since it needs to be imported from abroad, as we just haven't got the right climate in the UK. And before being imported, it also spent a number of weeks in the kiln so it comes relatively dry, and then I also left them in my wood storage for a number of months so they are nice and dry, ready to work with. And I spent a little over 1,500 British pounds, or just about 2,000 US dollars on this wood. So I'm only using some cheap packing table. It just shows you don't necessarily need to use the expensive epoxy resin tables. This one I believe is a 50 meter or 100 meter tape from Screwfix, and I pay probably £5 for it. And as you will see at the end, resin just do not stick to any smooth surface, and this tape just worked as a treat. Use some pocket holes at the fences just to make sure that resin will stay where it needs to stay, and obviously the weight of the resin won't push out the fence. Then I went around with some silicone just to waterproof it, and then hopefully the resin will stay where it should stay. Once the silicone was done, both on the inside and the outside, I was able to bring back all the cut pieces and start designing the final layout of all those amazing cookies. As I mentioned before, I really wanted to create a good wood and resin ratio where the wood is dominating in the project rather than having too much resin available in one single spot. So once all the big pieces are made back into the mold, I will be using smaller off-cut pieces just to fill the bigger voids around the edges and also in the middle, just to again improve a better wood resin ratio. And now it is time to start mixing some resin. And as always, I will be using Vista epoxy resin from Vista Resin, which is manufactured in the UK, and Mariana resin, specially formulated for epoxy resin tables. This is suitable for pours between 45 to 75mm, which is about 2 to 3 inches in depth. And this is crazy, I never ever had to use a bucket this size to mix my resin. So no wonder it made me nervous a little bit. So here I'm mixing 15 kg of resin, which is just a little over 30 pounds of resin in a single go, using a paint mixer and my cordless grill. I will be using a wooden stick just to scrape all the resin off from the side of the bucket, just to make sure I have one nice even mix. And the customer wanted to go with nice black color, so I will be using Vista Resin's black pigments. They also have more pigments available directly from their websites. Link down below in the comments, along with some discount codes if you wish to go ahead and do your own resin project. After a good 7-8 minutes mixing, the first bucket was ready to go inside the mold. So as I mentioned, this resin is formulated for tables and can be poured up to 75mm or just about 3cm, obviously depending on the ambient temperature and the surrounding temperature later in the evening, during the day. However, I wanted to play on the safe side and I decided to split this a little over 2 pour. It was about 5.5cm in overall thickness, so I split it into 2 separate pours just to keep it on the safe side. After about 30 hours, I reached stage B, which means the resin started to cure, however it's still not in a solid state. As you can see, it's no longer sticking to my finger, however it's still kind of squashable, if that's the right word. So in this stage you do not have to sand the surface. The resin still will, the second layer of resin will still adhere to the bottom layer, and then I went ahead and started to mixing a few more batches of resin. Overall, just over 95 kg, which is about 200 pounds of resin has gone into this project. And as you can see, I'm making quite a big overpour, and this will help me filling all the cracks and voids, and hopefully it will reduce the amount of filling I need to do later in the finishing stage. And whilst I'm using extra resin to do the overpour, it will save me some time as well at the end, so it kind of evens out. And popping all the air bubbles, always one of the most satisfying process to do. After 2 weeks in the mold, it's ready to be taken apart and demold this beast. And you can already see how easily the tape separating from the resin, and they're exactly the same what will happen when eventually I come to flip the table. It will just pop out nice and fine. So I'm using my DIY router sled, which is basically my router secured on the plate and running between 2 aluminium extrusions. It did the job just fine, but it was also a little pain at times. So here I'm using a 2-inch router bit, which has 4 carbide blades. And yes, I have tried running my router with an extrusion, but it just didn't make too much difference. So I decided to let the shavings go wherever they want, and then I would just deal with the mess afterwards. And even though the router bit is 2-inch, I had to take small passes, and overall it took me probably about 2 to 3 hours to go through this table 2 times and make it nice and flat. And oh dear, just look at all those shavings. Oh, I can already see some of the comments. So as I mentioned, the overpour meant to fill all the little voids and cracks, but obviously you always end up with some more to fill. So therefore I clean them out with some alcohol and with my brush, and then I will mix up some more epoxy resin, but this time I will go with Vista resin's special formula, which is Vista Cascades, and this is formulated for shallower pours, and this will be ready to sand in 24 hours. And using the same black dye to match the existing black color. As and when resin making its way into all the little voids and cracks, sometimes I just go back and top it up a little bit to ensure the crack gets completely filled. After 24 hours, I was ready to hit the table with my bulk sander, and I'm using 80 grit sandpaper, and this just ate through all the tool marks very easily and made my life a lot easier than using my orbital sander to remove some of those kind of harsh tool marks left after doing the flattening. And I didn't track the amount of sanding I needed to do with this project, but I'm quite confident it needs to be measured in several days rather than hours. The bulk sanding on its own, just to go with 80 grit, took probably 2 hours, and then the most time consuming was when I will be going over to using my orbital sander, because that doesn't take as much as materials as a bulk sander, and that took a very, very long time. Once it was sanded up to 120 grits, I started the process to separating the table from the mold. And as I mentioned before, the tape has done an incredible job and the table separated very easily. I needed some more help to flip the table, so I had a few guys pop around and help me flip over so I can start working on the bottom side of the table. So I can only estimate the weight of the table, but just the tabletop on its own weighs probably around 250 to 270 kilos, which is well over 500 pounds. Once the table was flipped over, I was then able to start flattening the bottom side as well. This process will not just create a flat surface, will also allow you to have a nice even thickness from one side to the other side of the table. And after a few hours of flattening, I was ready to move on and trim the edges using my truck saw. And to have a nice cut and to protect my machine, I went through each side in a number of different passes. So I think I total went through in 3 or 4 passes, and that left me with a very nice edge, and obviously the machine also survived. And then I repeated the very same process at each side. So this is the bottom side of the table, and now it will be sanded up to 120 grits. I will not go any higher since this one is the bottom, and it turned out relatively nice as well with 120 grits. And let's be honest, not many of us will be staring at the bottom of the table. And as always, sanding is always the most exciting part. Well, not really, but I tried to make it look like it's fun. After sanding, I grabbed my 45 degrees chamfered router bit. I will be going around the table in a number of different passes to create a nice and deep chamfered edge. Then I will be using my orbital sander just to go through the chamfered edge and bringing up to the same grit as the bottom side of the table. And between each grit I will be using some methylated spirit. This helps me to clean them from all the dust particles and also give you a little sneak peek how the finished piece will look like. I love that. To finish the table, I will be using Rubiomonocoat hard wax oil. This doesn't just provide an incredible look, but also provides great long-lasting protection. So if you were to make this table, what would be your resin color choice? I definitely fancy this black, but also probably we wouldn't go bad with some blue. But I know some people feel very funny about me using blue color, but keen to know what color would you go with this olive wood? Once the oil was applied, I just used a normal tablecloth to remove any excess oil, and then just waited 24 hours for the oil to cure, and then it was ready to flip over, and then I can start working on the top side of the table. The very same process will be applied to the top side, just like I did with the bottom side. I will apply a 45-degree chamfered edge, however for the top side I won't go as deep as I went with the bottom, so the cut will be a lot shallower, and I think I was able to do in a single pass. And for the top, I will be making my way from 120 grids, going over to 180, 240, and eventually finishing the table at 320 grit sandpaper. I'm not using any supportive C-channel for this table. The table leg will be fabricated out of steel. It will have a 4-inch square table legs at each corner, with supporting beams running across length and the width wise as well, so it will have a plenty of support from the underneath to support the table. Once the table was sanded up to 320 grits, and before I applied the oil finish to the top side, with the help of some lads from the surrounding workshops, we were able to transport the table to my workshop landlord's house, which was luckily just around the corner in the estate. I was rather nervous about this part of the process. However, luckily, we managed to get the tabletop safe and sound into the landlord's living room where the table will be positioned. Finishing the table here compared to in my dusty workshop will allow me to have a nice and smoother table finish. And just like at the bottom, I'm also using Rubiomonocoat Pure finish at the top. I'm using some non-abrasive pads to apply the oil, and then once the table was fully covered, I just used my cloth to wipe off all the excess oil, and just look at that. Then we had to wait for the oil to fully cure, and then the next day I went back and applied ceramic coating from Black Forest Wood Co, which will then further provide a nano layer of extra protection against any potential scratches or stains. But you can already see the extra sheen it creates, but the most important part is the extra layer of nano protection, what it adds to a table which will be fully in use and a functional piece of item. So hope you enjoyed this project build, and let me know down below in the comments, would you put this table in your house? See you all soon.